I'm Gia Kuhn with the CF Foundation, and we are so thrilled to have you join us today for what will be an interesting look into the journey of two longtime CF Foundation volunteers, and I may say friends, who have navigated the ups and downs of building a lifelong career while applying their skills to supporting philanthropic efforts and leadership positions. I'll let our speakers tell their own story tonight, but I want to introduce these two gentlemen. Marc Cassalina is a CF dad living in Milton, New York, who has worked in financial services for 33 years at Merrill Lynch. Marc has served as a senior resident director there and is currently a senior vice president leading a financial services practice that includes his son, Eric. Joining Marc tonight is a fellow CF dad, Paul Motenko. Paul is the co-founder and former co-CEO of BJ's Restaurants, Inc., and he's also the co-founder and former CEO of Stacked Restaurants. Paul is now semi-retired after some 30 years in the restaurant industry and resides in Orange County, California. So after we hear from Marc and Paul, you are going to have the opportunity to ask them questions. We encourage you to join the conversation, engage in chat, turn on your camera. And if you'd like to ask a question directly, you can just raise your hand feature and we'll get you off mute. A few housekeeping tips. Please keep your microphone muted during the first part of this presentation tonight to cut down any background noise. We welcome you to introduce yourself in the chat, share your name, where you're joining us from, and feel free to submit any questions throughout the program in the chat box, and we'll be sure to get back to you. So without further ado, it is indeed my pleasure to turn it over to Marc Cassalina to kick things off. Marc?
Thank you, Gia. Thank you for that introduction and welcoming us into this call today. First of all, I just want to thank all of you for getting involved with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and joining tomorrow's leaders. You know, I see your group as a significant part of our future. You're our next committee members, our next board members, and our future leaders. I want to have a special thank you to Harris Markowitz, who's been who without a direct DNA connection has led tomorrow's leaders for several years. And to Dean Marcus, also without direct DNA connection, is our New York Tomorrow's Leaders Chair and has spoken nationally for tomorrow's leaders. Today, I was asked to speak on entrepreneurship and leadership. You know, there's so many areas that I could delve into, but I thought I would focus on just three: responsibility, an ownership mentality, and growth. I've been at Merrill Lynch for 33 years, as Gia has said, and I've been involved with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation for the last 32 years. Since most of you are in your earlier stages of your careers, I thought I would share some stories from my early career. You know, I joined Merrill Lynch in June of 1990 at just 22 years old and directly out of college. During my college years, I worked as a full-time crane operator, a skill I learned from my father, who owned and operated a trucking company, and my uncle Sonny, who ran a crane company. What I took from that experience was unending work ethic and how to take full responsibility in everything that I did. You know, I wanted to own my own business from day one. So almost every day when I would go to work, I would ask myself, if I owned this business, what decision would I make in this given situation? Then I would quietly watch how the owners handled themselves and what the ultimate result was. I took that ownership mentality to work every single day. And I think that helped me with my career, my job, and all of that back then, because if anything was happening, if I thought I was the owner or I was trying to act as the owner at that stage of my life, I would address it and try to fix it. I transferred this practice to Merrill Lynch, you know, always looking towards those who were ahead of me or had a much larger, broader view. My work ethic and ownership mentality also transferred very well to Merrill when I was hired as a financial advisor in training. I knew that my success was my responsibility. Merrill might offer me some training and education, but in the end, it was going to be up to me. In the beginning, you know, Merrill sent me to Princeton, New Jersey for 3 weeks of training, or indoctrination, where we learned everything about Mother Merrill. My girlfriend at the time decided to join me for a weekend where our son Eric was conceived. We should have called him Princeton. But after training and licensing, I went into business in December of 1990. I was married in January of 1991, and Eric was born in July of that year. At 2 days old, he was helicoptered to Westchester Medical Center, where the first time we ever heard the term cystic fibrosis. When those 7 doctors walked into our room and said CF is a fatal genetic disease, and Eric's life expectancy was 19, we were just devastated. We decided that Margaret would stay home with Eric and I would support the family. You know, Merrill, the best analogy to describe what a new Merrill Lynch financial advisor is would be similar to owning a franchise. Merrill Lynch would train you, educate you, get your license, and then they would front you money in the form of a draw. And every month that was going by, I was digging a deeper and deeper hole at every passing month. I was running cranes at night and on the weekends to try to pay the rent and our mounting medical bills. Every day commuting to work, I would pray I wasn't going to get fired that day. And coming home late at night, telling my new bride, everything was going to be okay. 18 months later, our daughter Jenna was born, also with CF. By this time, we were all in. Divide and conquer is what we would say. Margaret became Dr. Mom, learning everything about CF care, reached out to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation to help find a cure for our kids, and I would continue to support the family. Merrill Lynch saw some promise in me. They wrote off that note I owed them and was told never to go into a deficit again. By my 3rd year, I was the last remaining advisor in our local class, and I was really growing. Things were working. I fully embraced my personal development and took full responsibility for my success. I was ranked 84th in the country for new account growth in my 3rd year. I soaked up everything I could on personal development. I walked on fire with Tony Robbins, which forced me to question all my beliefs and solidify who I was, steeped in integrity, character, and service to others. I embraced a quote from Jim Rohn 30 years ago that still applies today. And it was, work hard on your career, make a living. Work hard on yourself, make a fortune. I continue to work on personal development. I listen to Audible every day on my commute to work. I pack my lunch and eat at my desk almost every day. Lunchtime is where I complete my continuing education and ongoing education. As my career was taking off, so was our involvement with cystic fibrosis. Margaret chaired our local walkathon. We took ownership and responsibility for every aspect of its success. We would always say, who's making sure we have enough toilet paper? You know, that was our code for we are responsible for every single detail at this event. And that is the way we approach every event that we've gotten involved in with CF. And it's the way I approach my business. I'm responsible for every detail. Although I have people working for me and delegate, at the end, it's me. I'm responsible. Through our efforts with CF, we're beginning to be asked to do more and more. We both served on chapter boards, sat on various committees. We were national co-VLC chairs and national public advocacy chairs. My career and CF involvement really grew side by side. At Merrill, I was starting to lead people on my team and became a director. Right around the same time, I was asked to be board president for a New York CF chapter. The skills were complementary. I was doing more and more public speaking for both Merrill and for CF. I was asked to lead various projects or committees, and I found mentors in both organizations. Speaking of mentors, I can remember the first time I met Paul Motenko, who's our next speaker. We were at VLC, it's probably around 20 years or so ago. He stood up and spoke about cause-related marketing and his unbelievable commitment to CF. I remember being so impressed and thought, I can never be like him. They must have put us in the wrong room. But today, he and I serve on national committees together. We're speaking on this program tonight and are great personal friends. Let's keep growing. At the end of each month of my business, I send out a sort of a state of the business report. And I always sign off with, let's keep growing. I think this is so critical to our success. Of course, we want to keep growing the business, but we need to continue growing within the cystic fibrosis community. And of course, we need to keep growing as people. As tomorrow's leaders, I hope you're looking forward to what's next. Have you completed the current task at hand? Are you looking for the next event or area to serve? Where do your passions lie? Are your skills being utilized? Are you growing? Is your network expanding? Who is your mentor? It is so important for cystic fibrosis for all of you to stay connected to us. So be vocal. Let us know how you would like to serve and how we can help. Margaret and I started our CF commitment with the walk. Also, due to Paul Motenko, we got involved with the extreme hike. Our first hike was across the Grand Canyon. Also, because of Paul, I'm on the National Individual Giving Committee, the National Milestones Committee, and now I'm chairing the Legacy Committee. The point is, be careful who your friends are. They might just make you do a bunch of stuff. But truly, I have grown with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation as my strengths and interests have grown. As much as I used to love the walks, honestly, I'm kind of done with them. But I love extreme hiking, and I know I can make a huge impact through individual giving and legacy. The CF Foundation has helped my career, and my career has helped Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. For me, one doesn't exist without the other. Some of my closest friends have come from the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and they have shared the highs and lows of my life. The lowest point in my life was when my daughter Jenna lost her battle with cystic fibrosis in 2006, the age of 13. It was beyond devastating. There was an underlying voice, though, that kept telling me, some good must come from this. Through my wife's book, Beyond Breathing, so many people have got to meet Jenna. Her charisma, her positive attitude. She would often say pain is not a valid reason for stopping. So I knew we had to stay in the fight. Margaret and I are honored to deliver the National Jenna Award annually at the VLC to someone who does not have a direct DNA connection to CF, but has done amazing things to further the mission of cystic fibrosis. I believe Jenna's energy just perpetuates through that award and continues throughout the community. I have an amazing team of people at work who carry the ball when I'm out of touch. So make sure you have amazing people around you. One of the highlights of my career was about 10 years ago when my son Eric joined my practice. It is a joy to see him daily at the office and share in his growth and his success. Dean Marcus, who I mentioned before, also joined my practice about 5 years ago. They are the future of the CF organization, and they're the future of our financial services business. I hope through some of these stories, you can see the effects of persistence, having an ownership mentality, and growth can have in a career, an organization, and a life. I am so blessed to be able to serve our clients every day to help manage and improve their financial lives. And I am so blessed to be able to make an impact to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. As the chair of our Legacy Committee, I want to mention that legacy giving can be done at any age and at any amount. Margaret and I believe in putting our money where our mouth is, so we made $1 million commitment to the society last year. We feel strongly that there is more work to be done to treat those who are impacted by lasting issues with CF, those that don't have a current treatment, or those that are dealing with lung transplant. We believe a legacy commitment allows for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation to make the necessary investments today, knowing there is a legacy pipeline. We love to participate in gala and golf and hike, but we're comforted in knowing if something were to happen to us, our giving commitment will be met. We owe a tremendous amount of gratitude to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation that gave us 13 amazing years with our daughter Jenna, and has also almost cured Eric with Trikafta, allowing him to have a successful career, marry his beautiful wife Courtney, have an amazing son Easton, and they have one on the way. Well, thank you for listening. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have during the Q&A sessions. So now I'd like to turn it over to one of my very close friends, CF mentor and CF dad, Paul.
Hey, Marc, thanks so much. And first of all, I think I need to apologize for all the things I talked you into. I didn't realize what an influence I've been on your life. But one thing that you may not realize is we do have something else in common. You know, we both have children with CF. We both do extreme hikes. We do all those things. But I just found out moments ago, the other thing we have in common is we have both walked on fire with Tony Robbins. And that's, you know, that you talk about extreme, that's about as extreme as it gets. But I'm so thrilled to be, you know, talking to this group today. I love the Tomorrow's Leaders program, and I echo Marc's thank you to Harris and all of you who are involved in this great program. And what I'm going to talk about is the story of BJ's, and hope to, you know, impart a few lessons along the way. Now, how I got involved with BJ's is a story of passion, persistence, determination, but mostly of luck. I grew up in Chicago, and I always wanted to be in my own business. That was my goal, my career goal in life. Didn't know what business, but I always wanted to be in my own business. And when I went to college at the University of Illinois, I found my passion, pizza. I literally had pizza every single night of freshman year, and many nights thereafter. I was a pizza fanatic, and I decided there and then that I was going to take Chicago-style pizza and bring it to other places in the country, and that was going to be it. That was going to be the my entrepreneurship goal. But I graduated in accounting, and friends and family, you know, said, Paul, don't be an idiot, you know, go into accounting. It's a safer profession. So I started off in accounting, and then my wife and I moved to California, where the first thing I did was look for good pizza. And I found some decent pizza at a little pizza joint called BJ's Chicago Pizzeria. And shortly after I came to California, I started my own accounting practice. And in the mid 80s, I got a call from an attorney who had a question for me, and the question related to a couple of guys that came to him for advice, and they were the owners of BJ Chicago Pizzeria. Well, needless to say, I gave him the advice, and I said, please, you got to get me in front of these guys. I need to get them as a client. I explained my passion for the pizza business, and he said, calm down, let me see what I can do. Well, it was 2 years of begging before finally I got in front of the people at BJ's, and I then begged them to use my firm for their accounting because I wanted to live vicariously through them. They said, okay, and we had a great relationship until 1991, when they asked to get together with me. They had an offer to buy their business. And I said, please, you know how passionate I am about your business. Give me a couple of days to come up with a counter proposal. They said, okay. So I ran back to my office. I got one of my partners, Jerry Hennessy, and I said, Jerry, have you ever worked in a restaurant? And he said, yes, I was a busboy during high school. I said, perfect. Now we have restaurant experience. So we came up with a counter proposal. First of all, we had no experience and no money. So our proposal was, don't sell your business. Let us run your business and give us the exclusive rights to open new BJ's restaurants. And for some strange reason, they actually went with that. So one day we're in the accounting profession, and literally the next day we're in the pizza business. It's a culmination of a 16-year-old dream of mine. Again, determination, persistence, passion, but most of all, luck. But our luck ran out very quickly because we got into the business exactly when a recession started, which particularly hit California very hard. It was in 1991. And the business was going down, 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 down. And we were just, desperate. We didn't have money. We didn't have any way to pay the former owners their draw, which they insisted on. And we opened a couple restaurants of our own, which were doing okay, but we were really, really struggling. We were paying payroll through credit card advances. It was desperate, actually desperate times. But looking back at it, the thing that was most significant to me is we never considered failure. It wasn't even a thought for us to fail. But we did adjust our strategy based on circumstances. We needed to enhance the concept and become more competitive to offset the economic issues that were going on out there. And I actually have Marc, you'll appreciate this. I have a quote from Tony Robbins. It was, stay committed to your decisions, but stay flexible in your approach. I would actually, it's hard to improve on Tony Robbins, but I would actually change that a little bit. I'd replace decisions with vision. Stay committed to your vision, but stay flexible on your approach. That is something that has really served me well through the years. And that's exactly what we did, Jerry and I, at BJ's. Instead of these small pizza joints, we started opening big restaurants, 8 to 10,000 square foot restaurants. We expanded the menu from just pizza to over 60 items originally, and now it's well over 100. And we brought in the brewery part of the concept where we started brewing our own beer to remain very competitive in the brewing arena. And we did all these things and kind of created BJ's as it is today. But, we didn't really have the expertise to do all that ourselves. And one of the strategies we, felt was very important was to hire people who had already successfully done what we were planning to do in the next stages. So we originally hired people from California Pizza Kitchen, and it moved up to a concept called Claim Jumper, which is more regional, but in those days was very high volume. And then later in our careers at BJ's, we hired people from Cheesecake Factory, always looking for people who were kind of a step ahead of where we were at the time. And they provided a lot of expertise that we needed to get to those next levels. And basically it worked. We went from 3 little pizza joints when we took over BJ's to, many big successful restaurants. We grew throughout the country, and things were going, pretty well for us. But there was one thing that was really critical for our growth and our success, and that was to find purpose. And unfortunately, we found our purpose through challenge. My daughter Stacy was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, and as Marc mentioned, it's just the most devastating thing you could possibly hear. But it did give me and my partner Jerry, who's the most wonderful, amazing partner you could possibly have, the understanding of the importance of being philanthropic, not only to the organizations we support, but to the company itself, to create a culture. And what we wanted to do is create a culture of compassion. And it first started with, we would never say no to a good cause. Whatever we could do, we would do. And we became, very well known in the organization for not saying no. And team members would come to us saying, would you support me in this effort? Would you help this? It's important to me. Then we would always say yes. And then we got involved, more with Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. And we started a Cookies for Kids program where every time we sold our, at this time, pretty famous dessert called the Pizookie. If you haven't had one, you certainly should. And every time we sold the Pizookie, we donated a portion of the proceeds to CF. And over the years, have raised millions of dollars for CF that way. And we also had our restaurant openings as fundraisers for CF and raised, hundreds of thousands, probably millions of dollars that way as well. But the moral to this story is BJ's involvement with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, there's no question, has done more good for BJ's than it even has done for cystic fibrosis, because it created that culture where, when the restaurant business, especially, you have mostly people between 18 and 25 years old, we're now looking for the restaurant business as a career, but they found a purpose in what they were doing. And through finding that purpose, they really were loyal to our company and loyal to our guests. And that's how you create a great brand. I loved every minute of being with BJ's, but I retired from the company in 2009, along with my partner, Jerry, because we felt that the company needed more professional management. We were very entrepreneurial. And so we hired someone who had been the president of the Cheesecake Factory to take over as CEO. And then we just, went on the board and then eventually retired from the board. By the time we retired, we had about 80 restaurants. And today, BJ's has over 220 restaurants throughout the country. And the amazing thing is the culture that we started was so strong that it's still very strong today. I don't know, 13, 14 years after we left the company. And that's because of the passionate people that stay there. And I could not be more proud of what they've continued to do. So that's kind of the story of BJ's, but I have some just general advice that I'd like to, impart so that you actually get something worthwhile besides the taste for a Pizookie out of this talk. Advice is this: if you're going to go into business, think about what you're good at and think about what you're passionate about. And where those two things intersect, that's the kind of business you should be in. And that's advice number one. Number two is what something looks like, a particular system or an idea looks like on paper may not work in the real world, because people are complex, and what you particularly like or think is good or interesting may not be what people in general do. And this is particularly relevant in the restaurant industry, where I learned, very quickly that it doesn't matter what I particularly like in terms of food. It's what we think that the general public is going to like and embrace. And that's, something that's really important, but it's important in any business. And a great analogy can be made to CF research. What works well in the test tube may not work in the body. And we've, found out this the hard way many, many times when there's a very promising medication that's in the works. And in the test tube, it just, the mucus gets thin and all these great things happen. And then they put it in the human body, and there's things that happen in the human body that just prevent it from working at all or as effectively. And so, make sure you think about the general public, not just your own particular wants. And then look for what's missing. At BJ's, we did this. We were looking at casual full-service restaurants, and at this time, we're talking about 90s. There weren't too many of them which were celebratory, where you could really have a great time with friends and family, and really created an environment that was a celebration. And the BJ's, we said that BJ's is for people who like to celebrate life every day. So we made BJ's bigger than life. The facilities, the menu, the portion sizes, etc., things that you wouldn't get at home and things that made you want to celebrate. And that was a big part of our success. Got a couple of books for you to read, or one book actually, Start With Why by Simon Sinek. It's a classic, and everyone that wants to be in business, whether they work for another company or as an entrepreneur, should read that book and have it sink in. And then there's 3 podcasts I think you people should consider listening to. One is How I Built This with Guy Raz, who he interviews successful entrepreneurs and they talk about their stories, and it's incredible. Also with Guy Raz is Wisdom from the Top, where he interviews successful CEOs of major companies, and they talk about their rise up the ranks. And then How Leaders Lead by David Novak, who is the chairman of Yum International. They own probably the biggest restaurant company in the world. And he interviews leaders in many industries, and it's just incredibly informative. And if you get nothing from what I said, you'll get a lot from what they say. So with that, I will send it back to Gia for some questions and answers.
Wow. Paul, Marc, thank you so much for sharing your careers, talking about your families. I especially appreciated learning how the skills you developed in your careers were so transferable to your work at CF, and how your positive leadership and vision really served you well throughout. Just wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. Now it's time to open it up for some questions from you. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat, or you're welcome to come off of mute and raise your hand, and we'll get you asking the question live. Whatever suits you. Erin, is there anything in the chat that we can start with?
Absolutely. I got some direct messages that I'll read from as well. And it's funny that Paul ended with the recommendations for podcasts and books, because that was a question that came in, Marc, when you were speaking. Are there any books or podcasts that you would recommend? And Paul, if there are others, it looks like this is very popular ask in the chat.
Yeah, I read, like I said, I use Audible. I found it was always difficult for me to sit down and read. So I started doing Audible probably a few years ago, and I consume a lot more books now because I just read it or listen to it, I should say, on my trip back and forth to work. I tend to read a lot of business type stuff, business books, and I'm kind of right leaning, right? So I'm kind of conservative, I'm kind of right leaning. But I like to listen to stuff that others share with me. So I just read a really interesting book called The Man Who Broke Capitalism, which it was the story of Jack Welch. And it was a totally different perspective than I ever read before. And I'm not necessarily recommending it, but I'm sharing the idea of maybe reading things that might be counter to what you would generally always believe. So that was something I just read. Currently, I'm reading Walk in the Park by Bill Bryson, because I might be hiking the Appalachian Trail with Peter. So I'm reading some of that stuff. So, my interests, spread to a lot of different types of things. Atlas Shrugged is a classic. If you haven't read Atlas Shrugged, I would read that. Margaret, my wife's books, Beyond Breathing, LCF would be a great one.
Definitely. I could add to my list a little bit. A book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, I think is a great book for learning how to make decisions and run a company. And a podcast that is sometimes business related, but not always, is Tim Ferriss. And he interviews very successful people in very many different fields. And it's always interesting.
I do have another question here that for both of you. Do you think that having a passion outside of the office, like the CF Foundation, helps in your personal career as well as benefiting the culture of a company? For either of you or both?
Well, in our case, I think the answer is yes, but in our case, we were really forced into having a very significant interest outside of business because of having children with cystic fibrosis. But yeah, I don't think you ever want to be so narrowly focused. And the people you meet and the things you do outside of work always have a big impact on work. And if there's one thing, I don't know how many, maybe not too many of you are undergrads, maybe no one is an undergrad in school, but if I have one regret from college, besides those few times I drank too much, it is that I was too narrowly focused on accounting. I didn't have a broad enough education, and I wish I had broadened it. And that kind of thing, can translate into your adult life where you just want to have different experiences, not be so narrowly focused.
Yeah, CF has made a huge impact in my life, both professionally and personally. I tried to share some of that in my speech portion of this, but again, some of my closest friends have come from the CF Foundation. As we were dealing with CF in our lives, the people who really understood what we were dealing with were other parents within the CF community. And then as we kind of moved along with the foundation, we got to be, board service, nationally involved. That's when we started meeting people that were, superly highly motivated. And then we just connected so well, personally, as we're trying to solve big problems, right? Curing CF and raising bunches of money and also it fed back into business too, right? So some of those people ultimately became clients, and so it's just so interwoven in my life, CF Foundation, and obviously, Eric's success with on Trikafta. We would dream. My wife used to always, her dream was, one day I would tell my grandson what his daddy used to have, and we're almost living. We are almost living that life right now.
Thank you. You're getting a lot of love in the chat for the book list and the podcast you're providing. So I wanted to share that. I do have another question. Any tips on how to pick a good mentor?
Pick someone you like. Pick someone who's interested in being your mentor. And obviously pick someone who has expertise in the area that you want to go. I've been a mentor for many years at some universities, and it's really important to click with the person, because it works both ways. If you don't have that kind of seeing eye and chemistry and on the same level, it's just going to be a laborious situation. But if you find someone you really admire and like and feel like you'd enjoy talking to, that's really important.
Yeah, ditto on those topics. I've been a mentor, on a actual structured, professional way where I've mentored others. And obviously I look to mentors. I think the mentoring idea, again, exactly what Paul said, you want somebody you like. I always try to look for someone who's doing something that, I'm trying to do, right? And I think the mentoring idea, it kind of goes both ways, right? When you're a mentor, you have to really know what you're talking about. And when you're trying to teach somebody something, you have to have a really strong depth of knowledge in that. And then when you're asking people to do something, you're kind of reminding yourself you should be doing that too, right? So being a mentor is also very effective. And you can be a mentor at any stage of your career, right? Wherever it is. And I think, never stopping looking for mentors. And it doesn't have to be on a professional basis, but there's a gentleman that I reach out to fairly regularly. We probably, I don't know, every 6 months or quarterly, we'll just kind of get together. We're in a similar business. And you kind of share ideas. I would look to him as a bit of a mentor too. So I think never stop learning, never stop growing, never stop looking for that next person.
Thank you, Marc. I have another one here for either one of you or both.
Yeah, one thing, can I just break in here for a second?
Sure.
Oh.
Whoops.
Yeah, I just want to say that I had a mentor at CF. His name was Barry Gump, and what he told me, what he didn't teach me, he showed me through example, is when you speak about something like CF or even business, is to be very personal and to be vulnerable and to talk about feelings. And he changed the whole way that I, talk about CF to groups or to individuals. And, no one's better than that than Marc and Margaret, but it's something I had to learn. I don't know how you guys learned it, but learning from people, like Marc said, doesn't have to be a formal mentorship relationship. It's just, learn from people you admire and see, try to identify what it is that they do that's so successful.
Thank you, Paul. We still have time for a few more, so this question is for either one of you or both. How did you balance having such big careers or dedicated to monitoring culture when you were dealing with cystic fibrosis and some of the tough times? How did you balance all that? What helped you to balance? Who did you rely on?
First and foremost was my wife. We as I said before, we would say, let's divide and conquer, right? So she kind of took over the Dr. Mom, the CF related, all of those types of things, and which allowed me to focus on career. I have a partner that's been with me for 25 plus years. He was my college buddy, ended up in business. We ended up in business together. Kind of sounds similar to Paul and Jerry's. He was a huge and still is huge part of my life. And I have an assistant that's been with me for almost as long. So in my business, I developed such strong relationships within the business that when I was, needing to take care of things, whether it was CF or it was going to, a baseball game or T-ball game or something, right? They fully understood, what was happening in my life and would pick up that slack. So having just amazing, great spouse, amazing people around me, has helped me balance all that.
Thanks, Marc. Paul, did you want to add to that?
In the interest of time, I would just say ditto. That's exactly what I would have said. My wife and my business partner.
Okay.
I have a few more questions here, Gia, if that's okay, that came in separately. I guess for either of you, what is your number one piece of advice for a people manager?
Paul?
For someone who is a people manager?
Yes.
Be nice. I mean, these days it's really just, what a difficult job to manage people. But I say, lead by example, be sincere, be authentic, be honest, but most of all, be willing to do anything. My partner and I were both known for, the guys that would most likely pick up scraps from the floor in our restaurants. He would be sweeping the floor while I was bussing tables and doing different things. And, we didn't do that because, that was the thing we like to do most. But, it sent a message both to our guests and to our team members that we were willing to do anything. And I think, when I'm not saying, a lot of people have problems with, doing too much, but when you're managing people, let them know that you're in there with them and that you're there to help them and to make them succeed. And that they're an investment, not a cost. Yeah, I learned that lesson early in my career that I'm thinking, man, look at labor costs, and then I realized that, the people that we were hiring were investments in our future, and it's a much better way to look at it.
Thank you, Paul. Aaron, do you have any other questions in your chat?
I do have one more. What
One-
is one thing that you would recommend for someone just starting out in their career who can't yet contribute financially to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation?
I would say donate your time. I started off talking about walk. I can remember Margaret first reaching out to Doris Tolson, even though Doris Tolson's name, but she was one of the founding mothers of the foundation. And she suggested we get involved in a golf outing. You're talking 30 years ago, right? And the golf outing was like $1,000 a ticket, or and that we were like, are you kidding me? We're trying to raise $5 at that stage. So so we got involved. Right, we donated our time and our energy, right? So we'd be at the walk, we'd help doing whatever was needed. So, at every event we have, we need volunteers. We need volunteers at the galas, we need volunteers at the walkathons. So I would say donate your time, and then give the first $5 and ask your neighbor to do the same thing, and that's how you start raising some money, and over time it grows.
And you could still join the Legacy Society, right, Mark?
That's right.
Actually, looks like we might have a little time. I have a story that I think will resonate with you. I was talking to one of the auctioneers who's auctioned for decades for CF, and she said, "You know what? I started Bid for a Cure, which is where we just ask for money with no." You're not getting anything in return, and which has raised so many millions of dollars. It's been transformational for CF and so many other charitable organizations. She said what happened was I was at an event and I stepped out to the alley and I saw these two boys, and they were just hanging around, and I started talking to them and they asked what I was doing, and I told them, doing something for cystic fibrosis. I explained what CF was and so on, and they emptied their pockets and gave me $11.31. And she said, and I said, "Boys, come with me." I brought him back into the room. I put him up on stage. I said, "These boys just gave $11.31 to Cystic Fibrosis for a Cure. If they can do that, all the money in their pockets, you guys can, help us too, and just donate just to help find a cure for cystic fibrosis." People started saying, "I'll give $10,000. I'll do this. I'll do that." And they raised just an enormous amount of money. And that kind of started the whole idea of doing Bid for a Cure. So you never know whether it's, $1 or $5 or $11.31, what kind of impact you can have.
Well said, Paul. Aaron, do we have time for one more?
Sure do.
Okay.
It looks like we had the question, to apply Tony Robbins' quote, could you please comment on how by staying committed to its decisions and visions, the CF Foundation has also stayed flexible in its approach, whether that be in research or various milestones campaigns?
Yeah.
Who wants to take it first? Go ahead, Mark.
Maybe Paul, you're on the National Board of Trustees. Maybe you want to answer that.
Oh, yeah, maybe I should say. I don't know. It's the definition of staying flexible. You have to when you're in trying to cure a disease. You put things into drug development pipeline, and you have no idea if it's going to work or not. And so you have all these other drugs in the pipeline, and sometimes we say, "Why is there duplicate? It seems like you got 5 drugs for anti-infection and 6 drugs for inflammation and this and that. Why are we spending our resources on all these different things?" It's because some things, don't work, and you have to have backup is, the greatest leader of the foundation says you have to have a lot of, and based on what happens, you have to be flexible on, who it's applicable to, who it isn't, what the messages are that you're sending out. I mean, just everything changes based upon circumstances when you're trying to cure a disease like cystic fibrosis, and you have to be flexible. However, the CF Foundation has never, ever wavered from its vision and its mission, and that is to find a cure for all people with cystic fibrosis. And we use that vision to decide what things to fund and what things are just not under the umbrella of what foundations should support. And that vision is very, very, it's been very, foundation has gone in terms of fundraising and research. It's been like this ever since I've been involved.
Thank you, Paul. Well, it looks like we're at the end of our allotted time. I want to thank you, Marc and Paul, so much for being with us tonight, and for all of the attendees for joining us for the session. I do want to remind you our next professional development course, and it's going to be called Resources to Maximize Your Career Planning, is Wednesday, September 20th. From 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. So be on the lookout for a registration link in a few weeks. Again, thank you to our wonderful presenters tonight. It was just awesome having you with us. And thanks to everybody. Have a great night. That's a wrap.
Thanks, Gia. Thanks, everyone. Have a
Thank
good night.
you.
See you, Paul.
Take care. Bye-bye.